Okay, here we go. So it's my pleasure to welcome you all here for our graduation of the class of 2018. I think they're all dry from this morning, and although they were officially graduated this morning, we'll call this the dry graduation. I want to, before we begin, take a moment to thank all of the staff who were here, who organized today. This is a big endeavor, and we want to thank Dr. Lisa Moscoso, our Associate Dean for Student Affairs, and Cami Taylor and Kathy Torres Stewart from our Special Projects Office and our Office of Student Affairs and the Registrar's Office. Let's give them a round of applause. It's my honor now to introduce our commencement speaker. Dr. Adil Haider is a trauma surgeon at Brigham and Women's Hospital and the Kessler Director for the Center for Surgery and Public Health, which is a joint initiative of the Brigham and Women's Hospital, Harvard Medical School, and the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. He currently serves as president of the Association for Academic Surgery. Dr. Haider went to medical school in Aga Khan University in Karachi, Pakistan, and then came back to the U.S. for his training in general surgery at New York Medical College, training in surgical intensive care and trauma surgery at Johns Hopkins, and he also has a degree, an MPH degree from Johns Hopkins. His work has led to recognition of racial disparities in outcomes from traumatic injury and the establishment of the field of trauma disparities research. He is regarded as one of the foremost experts on healthcare inequities in the United States, with projects focused on describing and mitigating unequal outcomes based on gender, race, sexual orientation, ethnicity, age, and socioeconomic status. His other research focuses on long-term clinical and functional outcomes after trauma and emergency general surgery, optimal treatment of trauma, and critically ill patients in resource-poor settings, and advanced analytic techniques for surgical health services research. Dr. Haider believes that equality is the cornerstone of medicine, and his professional goal is to eradicate disparities in healthcare in the United States. We are very honored to have him here today, both as our speaker and a wonderful role model. Dr. Haider.
Good afternoon. Come on, we can do better than that. Good afternoon. There we go. This is going to be one of those kind of speeches, all right? Dean Permelator, thank you very much for that very generous introduction. Dean Moscoso, faculty, the parents, and of course the students. Congratulations on graduating another class from the Washington University School of Medicine. I want to start with congratulating all of your supporters here today. Your family, your friends, your siblings, your spouses, your partners, and of course, most of all, your parents, who made today possible for all of you. Congratulations. Now, I must say, when I was invited to give this address, I was very surprised. I mean, I'm deeply honored, but very surprised. Like, why did you want a trauma surgeon here? And so I tried to figure out what's going on, and I Googled Washington University class of 2018 School of Medicine. And the first thing that came up was your video from the first year of funk, right? Wasn't that great? I thought you wanted Bruno Mars, maybe. The video has 270,000 views. And while I was very inspired by your great dance moves and the jubilation about the pass-fail thing and and the ability to watch the lectures the next day, I needed to know more about your class. So I called your class president, Dr. Jorge Zermota. Congratulations on graduating today. And he told me that your class came together the week of the tragedy that happened in Ferguson when the unarmed Michael Brown was killed. And in what only could be the most cruelest of ironies, today we meet again as you graduate. On the day of your graduation, we have another shooting in Texas where 10 people have already been killed. 10 children have already been killed. And for that, and I took permission from the Chancellor, I'm going to ask for us to all rise for a moment of silence for all those who have lost their lives. Please sit down. Thank you very much. Now, I got to know some of the students from the class who has been impacted by all of this. And what all of you have told me is that you all want to make a difference. And you know what? I believe you. I believe in you. Because in you, I see people who will make a difference by not only living the American dream, but by actually upgrading it. What do I mean by that? You know the American dream where we're supposed to get a house and a white picket fence, a house with a white picket fence and maybe a car and a corner office? I think you want an upgrade version of that dream, where not only do you have those things, which you'll easily have now that you're physicians, but you're able to actually live a life of meaning and purpose and have an impact to society. I am inspired by the data on graduates like you that comes out and says that all of you reject inequality in all of its forms and want to ensure that all of us have those fundamental rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And as the protectors of life, as doctors, don't you think it's our moral duty to ensure that everybody has that access to a great life and the best possible health care? And being that all of you together are going to touch 1/5 of the economy, and you're going to take care of patients, rich or poor, all of us have the opportunity to make a difference. Now, I must say this really is my first time giving an address of this nature, and so I did look at other videos before doing this. And you know, I found something, Dean. Most of the medical doctors, they talk about the joys of practicing medicine. The basic scientists talk about the wonders of nature. The ER, or emergency medicine doctors, talk about all the other doctors. And the surgeons, well, you know, we're so modest, we always talk about ourselves. So I'm going to talk about, my own career and 3 stories from it that will give you some examples of how I've worked towards being a doctor, a scientist, and a team member, and being part of a team that's dedicated towards eradicating healthcare disparities. So here's story number 1. I was a trauma surgeon in Baltimore at Johns Hopkins, as you mentioned, for many years. And at nighttime, the pager goes off, and it says, 22-year-old male, GSW, or gunshot wound, African American, CPR in progress, 2 minutes ETA. Now that's the kind of page that happens almost every day amongst urban trauma centers and happened multiple times at your own hospital last night. Now I rush down to the trauma bay. I'm at the foot of the bed. The emergency department attending is at the head of the bed for the airway, and our chief resident is kind of in the middle. The patient is rushed in. The paramedics put him on the gurney, and I look right at the paramedics and say, "How long has he been down?" The paramedics say, 7 minutes. Now you all know we have about 10 minutes, right? So I look at the chief resident, and she's ready to go. She starts an emergency room thoracotomy, right? And what this is an emergency operation right there to go in and see if we can fix major injuries to the heart or blood vessels. You could think of it like a Hail Mary pass in football. As I walked to situate myself next to the chief resident, I realized that there would be no touchdown today. That there were such severe injuries that this was just unsurvivable. We had to pronounce the patient dead. There were 2 medical students, and we showed the medical students the injuries, and then it was time for us to go and discuss this outcome with the patient's family. The social workers told us that the family was in this large room. There were about 24 people in the room. And given that the chief resident had started the operation, we decided that she would be the one to deliver the news. And so she walks in, and she's taller than me. The ED attending walks behind her. He's taller than me as well. There are 2 medical students. They all walk in front, and I'm behind them. And as we all walk in, and remember, I'm behind them, this room full of people, there's an older lady sitting over there in the corner, and she looks at me and says, "Oh my God, it's you. He's dead." And with that, there's complete pandemonium, commotion. Some people begin to cry. Some people get up and walk out of the room. And the chief mouths to me. She says, "I didn't even say anything." And I look at her and I go sit down. I sit down next to this older woman and I say, I try to recognize her. "Do I know you?" And she says to me, "Yeah." And I know who she is. She's Kenny, and I'm making up this name. She's Kenny's grandmother. Kenny was my patient from about a year ago. Kenny was shot in his liver. He was an 18-year-old black kid. He was taken right up to the operating room. He had a large hole in the liver. We fixed that hole. And then we were able to, and he survived. He had multiple takebacks back and forth to the OR, but he did survive. And what this grandmother told me, that when I came out to tell her those news, it was a few hours later, it was in a different waiting room, and I was all pumped up. I had my chest high, and I was looking at her, and I told her what a great job we had done. But then 3 months ago, there was yet a 3rd grandson of hers who was shot in the head. And I pronounced him in the emergency department. And that day, similar to today, when I walked in, I was looking at the floor when I walked in. How is it that we live in a society where grandmothers know what the outcome of an operation is so well because they know the local trauma surgeon better than a family practice doctor, right? How is it that we live in a society where there is a 20% increased odds of death simply because you happen to be black after traumatic injury? This incident really brought me to the work I'm doing today. Remember, as you mentioned, I'm the son of immigrants, and I had planned to have a career in global surgery and global health, and maybe I'll go back to that career one day. But this was immediate, and I felt it was necessary to work on this right here at home. And so lesson number 1 is be open and listen for your passion. And when you feel it, pursue it. Sometimes your passion chooses you. Now the second story is a little shorter. And that's about what happened when I started saying, okay, we need to fix this. As you heard my introduction, I was like, my goal is to eradicate disparities. So I thought, well, I'm a surgeon and I should be given all the money in the world to go do something about this. And so I wrote grant after grant after grant after grant. And you know what happened? They all got rejected after rejected after rejected. Right? I was like, but I'm a surgeon. You have to fund me. And then I called a program officer at the NIH and said, well, what's the problem? Why do they keep getting rejected? And he said, well, I'll be honest with you. When they review your work, they say, well, good that he's a surgeon, good that he has passion, but the trouble is he has no training in social sciences methodology, no training in how he's going to understand the mechanisms that lead to this kind of social inequality, so we don't think he'll be able to do this kind of work. And so I said, okay, well, what should I do? And I went and spoke with my mentors, and then my first grant ever was actually a Career Development Award. It's called the K Award. And by learning the methods and learning from my mentors and becoming an expert in the field, then only people started to take me seriously, and we started to be able to do this kind of work in a much more methodologic fashion. So lesson number 2, be humble. And I know this is a surgeon saying be humble. Be humble, acknowledge your gaps, and address them to truly master the terrain you're trying to conquer. Now that being said, passion and mastery isn't enough. So my third story is about finding your team and your teammates. You have to be in a group kind of like those caravans of the past, when like-minded people would get together and then go out west to try to do something, and they would take care of one another. And here's an example of how that worked for me. The first time I ever presented work on healthcare disparities in trauma was at the American Association for Surgery of Trauma. Now, this is about 10 years ago, and please remember, we talk about healthcare disparities, right? How many people know about healthcare disparities? Raise your hand if you do, right? Most of the people who study here know about it. But in the world of trauma, most people thought that there would be no healthcare disparities, that because of its emergent nature, it would be immune from these kind of problems, that everybody has access. The emergency department is the great equalizer, right? And so when the first time in this large room of hundreds of surgeons, when I showed that, we found that African-American children had an increased odds of having a deficit in their ability to talk, in their ability to walk, and their ability to eat after severe head injury compared to white children, some people liked it, some people didn't like it at all. In fact, after the first few questions, there was a person who got at the back of the room, and I remember it like it was yesterday. The guy gets up at the back of the room and starts screaming. He says, "This is bullshit." Maybe I shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry. But that's what he said. And he started screaming. And then he approached the podium. And then I got off the podium and he's kept on screaming at me. And then at that point, my mentor, Eddie Cornwell, came up to me and started walking me away from this guy. And he said, "What, you're not going to let him answer the questions?" And my mentor looked at him and said, "If you talk like that, you're just not worth talking to." Right? As I walked out of there, other colleagues kind of gathered around me. And they said, "You should be able to publish this work." He kept on screaming, he's never going to let me get that work published. It's like, "Oh, you should be able to get this work published. That's not right. We're going to help you. We're going to do this kind of research ourselves." And then we created this National Disparities Working Group. Then the American College of Surgeons, the president at the time, L.D. Britt, took notice of us and said, "We're going to make this a big thing at the college." He was very interested in this. And then the NIH got involved, and we created the NIH ACS Agenda for Surgical Disparities Research. And now the NIH has funded at least 10 R01 grants in the field. So lesson number 3, find your caravan and don't let go. Some days you'll lead, and some days you'll follow. Your caravan of teammates will aid you on your journey. Now, being a skeptical surgeon myself, I know many of you might be thinking, well, he's just oversimplifying this. He was probably just lucky. And trust me, I know I'm very lucky. You might say that I came up in a different time and it's different now. And you know what? It is a different time. This is a time in our country where we are very disunited. There is extreme inequality. The American dream, or even quality healthcare, is out of reach for far too many. Closer to our profession, there are issues with disruptive physician behavior, physician burnout, the crazy costs of healthcare, gender inequality in medicine, and of course, a lack of funding for science. So if you just dismiss me as another speaker with lofty rhetoric and unattainable ideals, I would not blame you. But please remember, it is darkest before the dawn. These are unparalleled times, and unparalleled times provide great opportunity to make a difference. And if you want to be reminded of how people make a difference, just look at those kids from Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. They created a movement that many adults could never achieve. And today, again, there's a shooting, and it reminds us why there must be a movement now. So if you're ever told that you're too young or too junior or too low on the totem pole to start a movement, don't give in to that. There is no better time than today to be out there living your upgraded version of the American dream and enjoying a life full of meaning and impact. Now, I know that most of you will not be working directly on inequality, and that's fine. You might be focused on other things like solving Alzheimer's or beating cancer or creating a new flu vaccine, or perhaps most importantly, just focusing on taking care of patients. But these 3 tenets that I've talked about, finding your passion, developing your expertise, and then creating your caravan, should work all the same. And as you're out there doing these amazing feats of science and being a great doctor, if you do find the opportunities to make a difference in equality, please try. There are simple things you can do. If you're in a residency program where you find that there are not enough opportunities for underrepresented minorities, say something about it. If you see that one of your colleagues is being mistreated because of the way they look or their sexual orientation, speak up. And if you see that a patient is getting a raw deal because of who they are, what language they speak, what their skin color is, definitely you can do something about it. And if you want to do more, there are great organizations that you can volunteer with towards inequality. Right here in St. Louis, I got the opportunity to spend some time at the Better Family Life Center with Dr. Lori Punch, who took me there yesterday. You guys love Lori, right? Let's give her a round of applause. Because if we work together, we can create a world where equality really is the cornerstone of medicine, and there are no more grandmothers who are burying 2/3 of their grandsons before they even get to age 21. Now, as I close, I do want to recognize that you will face some hardships. Not everything will go the way you want them to go. You might lose a patient on the table. Dr. Eberlein can tell you that happens to surgeons, and it certainly happened to me. You might have a grant that doesn't get funded, or you might have an idea that's not really taken well at a conference. But in those moments, I want you to think how it felt when you walked across the stage today and got that WashU diploma. And remember that you are a graduate of the class of 2018. You really are one of the best of the best. You have the training, the skill, and grit to have an impact. You are a member of the class who refused to just accept the status quo, and you are destined to make a difference. Good luck. God bless you all. God bless America. Thank you very much.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Dr. Haider. It is now my pleasure to introduce